Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Wolf. Hi. I'm the programming coordinator for the Osterville Village Library. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, CapeAbilities, for being here. Today we have CapeAbilities guest speaker is Captain Meagher, captain and explorer, and most notably below deck. So without further ado, Captain Meagher.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Good.
Oh, excellent. So today, normally I'm going to depart from what I normally talk about, and I've been asked to talk about a myriad of different things. I'm involved in a lot of different projects, mostly involving the maritime, but also some environmental things that I do. I've done plastics cleanups in the Pacific Ocean. There's different types of new technology that I've been involved in. Of course, all the different vessels that I've been on and the television shows and the movies that I've done and all that exciting stuff. But what often gets overlooked are the people that surrounded me while I was doing all those great things, because I could not have done those alone. So today's talk is going to be a little bit different, and I'm going to call it A Little Help from My Friends. And we're going to talk about more so the people that surrounded me on these great and amazing voyages. Now, up on the screen right here, you can see all the different organizations that I'm a part of and some different boats that I've been on. The big orange W, that's Worth Avenue Yachts. I work for them as a broker and as a charter broker, and I've done some things around the water with them. They're a really cool company. I do a show called Dive In with Captain Sean on their YouTube channel, where we talk about really interesting destinations and all sorts of stuff. And then I'm a member of the New York Explorers Club, which is an old organization, started in the early 1900s. You've got people that were members of that, such as Sir Edmund Hillary, who climbed Everest. More modern guys that are part of that are actually Jeff Bezos, who is exploring space, James Cameron, you'll know for, as a famous film director. Also, if you didn't know, he's a big undersea explorer as well, too. And then on that little logo down there, you'll see the little two flags that are crossed. Those are it's the Monaco Yacht Club Captain's Club. Now, the Monaco Yacht Club has a captain's club. I'm very privileged to be part of that. They're also into exploration. And just a few weeks ago, there was a big event in Monaco called between the New York Explorers Club and the Monaco Yacht Club, where actually Prince Albert handed me an award for voyages that I did on a boat called Latitude, which I'll talk about. That's why that's in the center. That was one of the more famous boats that I was on. Of course, the St. Francis Yacht Club, Blue Gold, Below Deck, which we'll talk a little bit about, and Hyline Cruises. Now, Hyline Cruises was where it all started. When I was 18 years old, actually before that, when I was 14 years old, I was a deckhand on board their boats called the Patience and the Prudence. And that really started my career. Where prior to that, the very first boat that I was captain of was that laser right there. And that's kind of what I looked like when I very first got that boat. And people say to me, they're like, you're very good at what you do. You're a professional. But we all start somewhere in the beginning, and most of the time we're not very good at the things that we start. And that's an accurate representation. People say to me, they're like, boy, how can you bring those big boats into the dock so perfect every time? And my answer is because I've done it thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And so if you're starting anything that's new or something that you're scared about, that you're not sure that you can handle, you just got to do it over and over again. And that little sailboat led into a sailboat like that. That was a boat called Blue Gold, which I ran in the South Pacific, which we'll talk a little bit about later. And then that boat right there, you might remember that one that's the Below Deck boat. That's my Sienna. I went on many an adventure on that one. I took that boat from Europe, Caribbean, up into New England, all over the place. Baraska was probably technologically one of the most advanced sailboats on the planet at the time. She was 184 feet long with over 19,000 square feet of sail. And again, I didn't just jump, well, actually, I kind of did just jump on board that boat, but not knowing how to do something has never stopped me from doing anything. Finally, The biggest boat that I ever ran was 357 feet long, and that was called Bravo Eugenia. And that boat is a marvel of technology. It is essentially a giant Prius. It is a diesel-electric hybrid vessel. But again, how do they get there? I love what Arnold Schwarzenegger said. He says, "Don't ever call me a self-made man." He says, "Once you realize that you're a product of a lot of help, you'll acknowledge that you must help others." Now, Arnold Schwarzenegger is he's probably one of my personal mentors. I've read his books. I've obviously loved his movies, but I also love what he does in his private life too. He's a big supporter of Special Olympics. He has ties here to Cape Cod. And he is the first person to say that he would not have been successful without the people that surrounded him, from his friends that, when he was early bodybuilding, into his movie career, into everything. Arnold has always surrounded himself with good people. And he's always led a life where he has given back. Now, some of the people that were mentors to me, particularly it was my Uncle David. That's David Scudder. Some of you may remember him. You remember David. David was one of the principals at Hyline Cruises. He was taken way too early from us. He died of pancreatic cancer about a decade ago, right at this particular point. But David was, he was the first person to really give me a shot on board boats when I was really young. He took me for rides on the fishing boats and taught me a lot of different things. Then there was my Uncle Terry. He was a captain at Hyline. He was, at the time, one of the youngest captains at Hyline Cruises. He was 19 years old. And there he is actually teaching. That's not me. I never had blonde hair. That's my cousin Matthew. Matthew. And then finally, my stepfather, Peter O'Keefe. Kind of hard to see right there, but he was there. He is dressed as a monkey sailing sailing a boat. But that's him. And Peter was one of the first people to suggest that I get into this thing called the yachting industry. And then, of course, a long list of people. Jerry Poynant was a manager at Hyline who gave me my first ride at 18. That's right, I was a captain at 18 at Hyline Cruises, beating my Uncle Terry by 1 year and becoming the youngest captain at that company. Other people that were instrumental in my life. There's a long list, and I could take up hours telling you great stories about all of these different people. Now, where it all started was right here in Nantucket Sound. This is where I cut my teeth, as I showed you that map earlier, where I learned how to sail on that laser. But the first two boats I really started running, actually the very first boat, you see that little boat there to the left? That's the Prudence. The Prudence was built in 1911 and had rope steering. And that's the first boat that I was deckhand on and captain of. I then graduated to the Patience, which that was a sister ship to the Prudence. She was built in 1983 as a replica. And that boat had still single screw, which means it had one engine. And again, how did I learn how to drive that boat? It was by doing it and doing it and doing it. One of the best educations I had was literally taking that boat on and off the dock 9 times a day. Now, when people say to me, I wish I could do what you did, or do what you do. And these are generally people that I work with within the maritime industry. And I said, well, you can do what I do. I said, you just need to just go ahead and do it. And there's guys that I've worked with at certain boat organizations or certain boat companies that are still there and still doing it. They do it excellent. But they say, how do I do it? And I said, well, you just got to go ahead and you just got to do it. Now, one of the most interesting boats that I've ever been captain of was this boat called Blue Gold. She is a 162-foot staysail schooner. And I sailed her in the South Pacific. If you'll notice, you'll see that picture. That's actually of a volcano erupting. And I took that picture actually from way too close. If you're ever near a volcano, I suggest that you don't get as close as I did to get that type of picture. And it was an amazing, amazing experience. I actually met the owner of that boat at Starbucks in Manhattan. I started a conversation with him because you never know who you're gonna talk to, or you never know if you're nice to someone, how that's gonna come back to you. Anyway, the conversation started. I said, what do you do? And he says, well, I own a shipyard. I said, really? I said, I'm into shipping. And he said, and he goes, I own a yacht as well too. And I said, well, what do you know? I'm a super yacht captain. He says, do you need a job? I said, well, not right now. Do you need a captain? He goes, not right now. I said, well, let's exchange numbers. Well, a few months later, he said, I do need a captain. And I was ready to go because, as I've said to many times, and I say this to every single one of my crew, it is always better to be prepared for an opportunity and not have one than to have an opportunity and not be prepared. I was prepared to go. I had the right licenses. It was the right time of my life. I had done my homework a little bit on the South Pacific in anticipation of doing that. Now, when I got to the boat, it was a little bit of a different story. We're not going to get into a huge amount of details, but it wasn't as in good a shape as I thought it was going to be. And I thought to myself, how am I going to get this boat ready? Because we had a lot of charters that we had to do, and we had only a couple months to get the boat ready. And I was able to put together an amazing crew. Now, you think of people on board these boats as being highly skilled and well-educated in their craft and having all the right credentials. Well, anyway, none of those people did. And I'm gonna just give you a couple of examples. You see the guy in the pink shirt there, his name is Pancho. Now, Pancho was my bosun on board that boat. He was in his 50s. A lot of people say that, the yachting game or this particular game is a young man's game. Well, anyway, he was born in the Philippines. He'd been on a lot of different boats, and somehow he wound up on Blue Gold. And he didn't like the former captains because they were mean to him, and he was kind of shy on board. But I got to know him a little. I get to know him. And I noticed that he wasn't completing simple tasks that I was asking him to do. He was getting confused about them. And rather than berate him for his poor performance, what I wanted to know is why he was performing poorly. And this is a question that teachers get asked this all the time. They're like, they get a student that they know there's something there, and they want to know why he isn't or she isn't performing up to their true potential. And the simple answer to that was like, well, get his eyes checked. So I did. And it turns out he needed glasses. And getting him to wear his glasses was something different too, because where he was born and where he was raised, glasses were they were a luxury item. And what I had to kind of teach him was that it's not a luxury item. This is a tool for success. If you wear your glasses, you'll be able to do your job better. You'll see the world will come literally into focus for you. And once he started doing that, his job performance started to improve. Subsequently, we gave him a raise because he was able to do those simple tasks. They became simple for him as well. When you look at somebody, you can't just look at, you can't look at them like they're a balance sheet. Like, why aren't they producing enough? Is you really got to look at the whole person. And something that I've always tried to do is, no matter who you are or where you come from, if you're on my crew, I'm going to look at you and I'm going to think, what tools do you need to succeed? And then I'm going to give you all those tools to do that. Now, the other people in that picture too, you see the guy off to the white, right in the white right there. That was his girlfriend at the time, Mariah. They were both from Holland. Again, I gave them the right tools they needed to do, which was they were in charge of the interior of that vessel, and they exceeded my expectations. The guy in the middle right there, Sam Bell, was an engineer. Again, I gave him the right tools you need to fix the boat, and he did. He exceeded my expectations. I didn't micromanage them. I let them do their job. Lenny, the chef on the end, she was from the Philippines. I've always said this about anybody that's a crew member with me. If you do right by me, I'll do right by you. Everybody on that crew landed well. She now runs a big restaurant in New Zealand. And then finally, there's Amy right there with the necklace. She is now a clinical psychologist. So you never know the tank that you have. One of the other boats that I was on, right after Blue Gold, I kind of came out of the jungles of Vanuatu and jumped on a more of a mainstream vessel. This is called New Vida. It was a very, very aggressive charter platform. I was tasked with rebuilding the crew and turning it into a world-class organization. And again, you do not do that by yourself. The picture that you saw prior to that, that was from 4th of July that we did, a party that we did on the Docket Fan Pier in Boston. But when I first got the boat, she was over in Europe. And you'll see her there nestled into that corner right there. That is in Elba, where Napoleon was banned. We tucked her right into that particular corner. We did some amazing charters on board that boat. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the effect of just doing a good job has on yourself and on the people that you do that good job for. This particular trip that you're looking at right now is like, we had a woman that was a ballerina, and she was a guest on board the boat, and she had rheumatoid arthritis, and she really couldn't move around a lot. So one of her wishes that she wanted to see a ballet. So we brought the ballet to her. We brought the experience to her. It was a really moving day. She was really touched by it, and everybody came away from that experience better. Another experience that we had was actually in Europe. I had a Russian family that came on board, and the principal was this big old gruff Russian guy, and he, for 3 days we had him, he was still kind of like sullen, and he didn't look like he was having fun. And I went up to him and I said, is there anything that we could be doing better? And he goes, no, it's not you. He goes, it's me. And I said, well, what's wrong? And he goes, well, I run the largest car factory in the world. I have 300,000 employees. And when I get back, I have to lay off 20,000 of them. And it was really wearing on him. But anyway, what we did was we just did our job, but we did it at an exceptional level. And that trip turned out magical. Now, I find that most of the time that these high net worth individuals that come on board these trips, what they want to do is reconnect with their friends and family. And that's what we did. He was having fun with his sons. He was having fun with his daughter. He and his wife were laughing. By the end of that trip, he was a different individual. And we were pulling into Monaco, and he was up in the pilot house at the end of the trip, and he said, I think I figured out a way to keep those 20,000 people employed. And that's where the light bulb dawned on me. It said that just by doing our job and by doing it well, and by keeping smiles on our faces, that we positively impacted the people that were in our charge and around us. And when you do that to the right people, in instance, this guy, you can change things on geopolitical levels that you can't even fathom the ripple effects. Essentially, we were able to, by kind of decompressing that guy enough where he could think clearly, we saved 20,000 people's jobs. Now, you might think to yourself, well, I'm not in that particular position to do something like that, but that's not true. Just by the stuff that you do at the jobs that you do, just by doing it well, and just by having a smile on your face, and by someone coming in and you're pleasant to them, that has a ripple effect, and they go off and be pleasant to someone else. There's a ripple effect, compound effect. It's been written about over and over and over again. But what you do, no matter how small, it does matter. And you definitely matter in the jobs that you do. And don't ever forget that. Now, some of the people that helped make that happen around me, these were the crew I had on board that boat. And again, they generally weren't your typical crew. The two girls off the left there, they were both from New Zealand. They were girlhood friends. The one on the right in that particular picture lived. When I came on board, she'd never been a chief stew before. And I didn't care. I just was like, I looked at her, I met her, and I said, you're the chief stew. And I threw her off in the deep end, but not without a life raft, and not without things in that life raft to make her job improve. She said, Liv was like, I don't know anything about wines. I said, we'll send you to a wine course. She's like, okay. I don't know how to do laundry. Well, we have YouTube. We can figure out how to do laundry on that. And she did. Liv became one of the best chief stews I've ever worked with. And the second picture, you can see this is a crew. This is actually right here in Hyannis Harbor. You see the big guy in the striped shirt right there, Paul Carlstrom, probably one of the best chefs I've ever worked with. Paul, again, just by doing his job, made magical things happen. I mean, he killed it for me on board that boat. Outstanding, outstanding chef. But an interesting story about Paul is Paul went to go work in the Mideast in Qatar on the Prince's boat. Well, anyway, it sounds like a fairy tale. The king's boat broke, so the king went to use the boat, and he traveled with about 5 different chefs, and the Paul got relegated to making breakfast for the crew. Well, about 6 a.m., the king walks into the galley, and Paul's sitting there, and he says, looks around because he can't find anybody, and he says, "Could you make me breakfast?" And Paul says, "Why, certainly, Your Majesty, I'd be happy to make you breakfast. What would you like?" And he goes, "Can you make me an omelet?" And Paul said, "Certainly, I can make you an omelet." Now, when Paul makes an omelet, he knew the chicken that laid the eggs. He organically grew the vegetables that needed there. He could name every individual spice and he could spice everything perfect. He was a master at his craft. And again, always be prepared for an opportunity, even if you don't know you're going to have it. And that morning he was prepared, and he made that king the best omelet he ever had, and he served it to him. And then the king says, "Can you make me lunch?" And the king said, Paul said, "Sure, what would you like?" And he goes, "How about a club sandwich?" And Paul said, "Sure, I'll make you a club sandwich." Anyway, it was the best club sandwich that king had ever eaten. And then the king said, "Can you make me dinner?" And Paul said, "Absolutely. What would you like?" And he goes, "Surprise me." And that's when Paul really pulled out the stops and made that king the best dinner that he had ever had. And subsequently replaced all his chefs and became the king of Qatar's personal chef. Amazing stories. And again, just by doing your job well and being prepared, you can make those dreams come true. A lot of other stories about a lot of other people in this, but we're going to move on to Latitude. Now, Latitude was one of the penultimate voyages that I was ever on. I was on board that boat for 5 years. 2 Northwest passages in both directions in continuous years. We're the 3rd private vessel in history ever to do that. We then went and circumnavigated Svalbard and punched within 500 miles of the North Pole. We were a non-ice classed vessel. Again, I'm not going to get into why technically that's unique, but we were the first private vessel in history ever to do that.
There's a Franklin expedition, that's why.
And anyway, this is a picture of us up in Greenland on the very first leg of the Northwest Passage that we did. Now, again, the great people that were around me for that, I could not have done this trip or had the opportunity to do this trip without Anil Thadani. Anil Thadani is the owner of Latitude. Now, Anil started off with relatively humble beginnings in India. Went to University of Michigan on a scholarship, became an engineer, eventually got into finance, opened his own company, and the rest, as they say, is history. Truly extraordinary individual. And again, he gave me every tool I needed to succeed. And the latitude, no pun intended, to really make some unique decisions. Because that boat wasn't traditionally, quote unquote, an expedition vessel. So we had to get creative when we went on expeditions. When I first met Anil, I asked him, I said, "Why are you buying this boat?" And his answer to me was "I want to go on adventures and photograph wildlife." And these are some of the photographs that we brought back. We loved the polar bears. And I was privileged to spend 3 years photographing these amazing, amazing animals. This is a family, mother and 2 baby bears that we saw on an ice floe. There they are. And they're really cute. Yeah, and that was those are type of the adventures that I got to do every day on Latitude. But what was really unique about that vessel were the crew and the people that helped put me there. This guy that you see here, that's Bill O'Leary. I would not have a career today if it was not for Billo. Billo introduced me to Anil. He's been a great friend for a long time. That's him in the Solomon Islands with a bunch of native children on an island called St. Mary's. Truly great guy. He is, if you want to know more about Billo, he and I did a podcast on chartering in Thailand, which is on the Worth Avenue YouTube channel called that's the one to dive in with Captain Sean's, and you can see it. It just says cruising in Thailand. But anyway, great adventure, great friend. And one of the people who I met at the right time, at the right place, and would not have a career without him. Somebody who I listen to quite a bit, and I recommend that you listen to, is Les Brown. One of my favorite quotes is, don't let someone else's opinion of you become your reality. And what he was talking about was when in high school, he was labeled as being educable, mentally retarded. And he was held back. And teachers just, because he had that label, teachers just assumed that he was stupid. And he was unable to do, certain tasks. And it wasn't until that he met a teacher called Mr. Washington. He walked into the class and he was sitting in the back, and the teacher said to him, he says, "Mr. Brown, why don't you come up and do this problem on the board?" He goes, "I can't." And he says, "I didn't ask you if you couldn't. I asked you if you come up here and do the problem." He goes, "Well, I can't, sir." He says, I'm educable, mentally retarded. And Mr. Brown got up from his desk and he walked over to Les Brown and he said, "Don't ever say that." He said, "Don't let someone else's opinion become your reality." And it's true. And I've seen that time and time again with people that have, I've witnessed do amazing things. And probably my favorite example was my chief stew on board Latitude, Haley Smith. So a question that I ask everyone when they interview with me, I said, if you could do anything, what would you do? And I mean anything, be an astronaut, be a ballerina, it doesn't matter. Haley said to me, she goes, "I want to be a pilot." And I said, "Well, that's wonderful." I said, "I'm going to hold you to that." And today she's a pilot. Now, this is a girl that was told that in high school that she would never amount to be anything more than like a coffee barista. And she barely got out of high school. I don't even think she had a GED. And today she was a pilot. She was probably one of the most talented chief stews that I ever had. She said she was told that she couldn't do math, that she couldn't do write, that she couldn't do all those things. And I'll let you tell you, she did all those things for me. And I believe that the difference between stress and passion is, stress is something that you do that you don't want to do and that you're working hard to. Passion is something that you do that you love. And once she found something that she loved, she realized that there was nothing that was impossible. There she is in the South Pacific, looking at a volcano.
It looks photo.
That's not Photoshop. That is a real photo in front of a volcano. The other thing that I always try to do too is that, and I see so many employers and just people in general will meet someone and immediately try to fix their faults. And that's a loser. I don't look at people that way. I says, what I like to do is focus on, as I say, is focus on your strength, not your weak spots. And I've seen that time and time again. The guy off to the right there is, that's Cliff Tweeden. They're gonna talk a little bit about me. That's me on Bear Patrol.
Yeah.
And this guy right here. Now, Cliff was my chief engineer on board Latitude. And he didn't have, he started off loading cement trucks in Montana. I got a job as a deckhand on board a boat, Ohana, that I was a charter captain on. And I saw something then in him. And I didn't care that he didn't have all the right pedigrees and that he was bad in school and all these things. I saw that he had a drive, which I knew that he would be successful. And when I took him on board the boat, he even said to me, he goes, "I don't have I don't have the education to do this job. And I said, yes, but you've got something that's a lot more important. I said, you've got the stick to itiveness, and I know that you'll figure it out, and I trusted him with it. And I didn't focus on what he didn't have, I focused on what he did have. And what I found is when you focus on people's strengths, their weak spots start to fade away and start to diminish. 100%, seen it every time, because the two cannot exist in the same body. You feed someone's strengths, they will become stronger. The weak points, just because they cannot exist, they will become stronger as well too. Today, after again being told that Cliff wasn't going to amount to much by a lot of different people, he now owns he's now part of an engineering firm in Auckland, New Zealand. Amazing guy and a dear friend. This guy, his head got cut off right here, Rob Morsman. When I first met Rob, he was interviewing for the job as second engineer. And he came in and he was sitting across the table from me and he was despondent. And I said, and he was just going through the motions in the interview. And I said, what's wrong? And he goes, I just failed my ENG1. Now, an ENG1 is a medical certificate that says that you can or cannot work on boats. I said, and I looked at the guy's resume. He'd worked on board boats before, like just this week prior. And I go, well, what did they say? And they say, well, I'm colorblind and deaf. And I go, has that hurt you before? And he was like, no. And I said, come with me. And I literally left the interview and I brought him to the boat and I handed him a wrench and I gave him the clip and I said, put him to work. And he went to work. And he worked for me for the next 5 years. Rob was extraordinarily talented. He was a master carpenter for Fedship. He had engineering knowledge that I will never have. And yet someone told him that he could no longer do his job. And which was ridiculous. He'd been doing his job just fine up until that particular point. Again, someone's opinion of you does not have to become your reality. And sometimes you need someone to advocate for you, to say, no, that's ridiculous. Now, would I want, Rob performing brain surgery on me? Probably not. But but as an engineer and everything that he did do, he was outstanding at his job, and he was an integral part of our success on board Latitude. Sheldon Dupree. That's probably one of the coolest pictures that I have is Sheldon. That was when we were wakeboarding through an ice field in Greenland, right there. And Sheldon, again, came to me off, he was the first mate on board another vessel where the captain was, it was not a healthy situation on board. He came to me a little bit down and despondent. Again, here's a guy that was smart, but not traditionally smart. He had the right licenses and right credentials of someone that I needed. But again, he decided college wasn't for him. Sheldon was probably one of the most outstanding, not probably, I say Sheldon was bar none in my top 3 most outstanding first officers that I've ever had. Sheldon has now an award-winning videographer for the BBC. They fly him all over the world to shoot amazing videos. One of the videos that he did for us on Latitude was the highest latitude. And that was the bud of an amazing career. And I literally locked Sheldon in a room for like 90 days and said, come out with something great, because I knew he could. And I knew that if I gave him all the tools that he needed to do that job, that he would come out with something great. If you haven't seen that movie, I highly recommend it. Below Deck. How did I wind up on Below Deck? Interesting story. For years, I used to joke, I go, this is where crew go to destroy their careers and captains go to die. And that was a little bit unfair. During the pandemic, the boat, My Sienna, which was New Vita, so I was the captain of that boat. It got extended, became My Sienna. Anyway, during the pandemic, My Sienna was stuck in Antigua, and they needed someone to take it up north and back to Fort Lauderdale. So the owner contacted me. I flew down there with a couple of crew and hopped on board that boat. And when I was there, I actually talked to people that had been part of the show, some of the production team, everybody, and my opinion started to change. And I thought, I go, that's really not the impression that I had. I dropped the boat off in Fort Lauderdale, got on a plane, literally. An email popped up on my phone and said, do you want to be on below deck? And I thought to myself, what haven't I done? I've had an extraordinary career. So I said, yes. And then my phone rang and they said, really? And I said, really? And that started this long process about getting me on the show. Now, how I wound up on the show is that Captain Lee was, he had a medical condition, and so he wasn't going to be able to make it for the first couple of episodes. And that's how I wound up doing those first episodes on the show. But what we often see on board that show is they like to show a good train wreck. But what you didn't see was there was some real talent on that crew. Like Eddie the bosun is a tug captain in Maryland. You had Fraser, the second stew, has gone on to do multiple seasons. He had a ton of talent. There were some really, really good people on there. And often that you see the things, you see, they focus on when they mess up or they go out or they party too much. But oftentimes what you didn't see on that show was just how hard they really worked to make those experiences with the people real and substantial. I really wish I pitched the show actually Below Deck Adventure, on which they did actually wind up doing it, but they didn't do the version that I wanted them to do. Because I wanted to showcase the extraordinary events that happen in this industry, the tech, the destinations, the wildlife, and most importantly, that the people that are in this industry are highly competent, highly skilled, and some of the best employees or just people in general in any industry. That's a picture of me looking all captain like from below deck. Now, this is a quote that I've always liked. It's something that I've said. He goes, I'm an artist. If you give me a tuba, I'll bring something out of it. And it's the same as true as employees. When I have an interview and you come down and you sit in front of me, I'm fairly certain that you know how to do the basics of the job. And what I really want to know is what is special about you? I was interviewing a gentleman for a job as deckhand one time, and I was reading through his resume and I was bored because it was about the 10th person that I've seen. And I flipped it over to the back, and on the back it said, under hobbies, it said fire eating and juggling. And I went, and so he's telling me about his skills as a deckhand, and I stopped him. I said, tell me about this. And he started to tell me about how he learned that when he was in Fiji. His father was an ombudsman, which was, he would talk to the local tribes, and he met this from Fiji, the Fiji natives. And that was fascinating. And when that was something that I could work with. And I go, okay, if you're coming on board here, you're going to be fire eating and juggling for me. And he did. And it was like it's those little skills that sometimes that you don't think that are important are key. And it's also the type of things that are key of when you're working in a job. If you can bring those hidden talents that you have, or talents that you like to hide because you think people are going to be embarrassed about them, well, don't. Because otherwise, you're just not going to be happy. It's like if you like certain types of music or you like certain types of television shows or something, let that be known. Because then you might be surprised. Someone else might say, I like that too. And then something extraordinary happens. And then you can bring your hobbies and your passions into your work. And it just makes the environment fun and a lot more rewarding. Now, oftentimes new situations, people say, how do you go into these new situations? Aren't they scary? And yeah, they are sometimes, like walking into any new situation can be scary. But oftentimes your fears, they're not real. What you're running away from is obviously sometimes something is a lot less scary. And you wind up embracing those fears and doing something, like a a lot of fun as soon as you can turn it around. Now, I'll leave you with one other, like, just kind of one other thing. This is again from Les Brown. It's like, don't aim too low. It's one of the biggest mistakes most people make. It's like they say, I'll ask them, I say, you know, like, what do you want to be? And say someone's applying for the job, it's like it's a second stew on board the boat. And they say, I want to be a second stew. And I go, well, it's almost, I can't really do anything with you at that point. What I want to hear is, I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be a nurse, or something, or something that's beyond their scope that they don't even know about. Because even if they don't achieve that goal, what they become in the process is really, really the magic in that. So if you have a goal or have something that you want to do, don't be ashamed about it. And also too, bigger goals are better. Bigger goals are better, even if you don't make it. And then if you do make it, look for the next mountain. This is the question that I ask of everyone. If you could do anything, if you could be anything, what would it be? And you don't have to answer that right now, but as you leave this room, or as anybody that watching it on Zoom, think about that. Think about what you want to be and what you want to do. It is easier than you think it is. And that goal is, no matter how big it is something that if you strive for, you will land among the stars. Anyway, thank you very much.